Wait for it. Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans and one chaos coordinator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, today's going to be another one of those short interviews about a short story. So we're talking again about Deadly Flames, Dragons in Combat, a Bayonet Books Anthology, book 11 in the series. And today we have Mr. Jordan Campbell on deck. So could you introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers at home?
Hello, everyone. My name is Jordan. I am the author of the story Ashes to Ashes in the Dragon Anthology. Excuse me, I have a tickle in my throat.
It happens, and it always happens when it's least convenient. That's kind of the way of the world.
Oh, the stories I could tell you there.
So how did you, before we do the religion question, since your introduction was a little bit short, how did you get into writing and your love of literature?
Oh, well, I've loved reading and writing since I was a little kid. I mean, my earliest memories are of my parents reading to me in the rocking chair when my twin brother and I were tiny. And when it came to telling stories, my brother and I would act out stories with our stuffed animals or our Thomas the Tank Engine trains. But when it came to writing my own stories, I think it had to be about third grade. And, you know, the teacher says, write a story about such and such, blah, blah, blah. Or the teacher assignment. And my story was so long. My parents had to tell me to stop and say that, Jordan, this is too long. You can't write this at 8 years old. The basic idea was a group of hybrid animals would be traveling through the wilderness in the kingdom to find the lost princess. And I already had like 4 pages written, and I hadn't barely even started, but our teacher was basically expecting 5 pages max. So yeah, I had to change tactics a bit. But yeah, I've always loved reading. I've always loved writing. And when I was writing stories in middle school for extra credit, I was in college. I wrote a novel for my thesis in the honors college. And I've been wanting to write since I can remember. Or so a couple of years ago now, Larry Correa started the Writers Dojo. I said, okay, I like him. I respect him. He knows his stuff. I want to write. I'll learn from him. And then I started I listened to his podcast. I started writing short stories. I submitted to Rat Contra Press, to Yield Dragons, and then to Bayonet Books. And here we are.
And so the Writers Dojo is a podcast that you can find on all the podcasty platforms, and it is the opposite of what we do. We try to talk to readers about the things we love to nerd out on. They talk to writers on how to write the things that you'll nerd out on. So if that's an interest of yours, Writers Dojo is a good place to go. Keystroke Medium, some of their old content is really good. And then I would recommend the Listeners of the Dead Robot Society is a final podcast if you're looking, dear listener, for that kind of content. And with that, so basically the same origin story as just about every other writer out there. You've just always loved to read and don't remember not.
Pretty much.
What made you decide to make a professional go at it? Was it just hearing the Larry Correa podcast, or had you already been tickling the idea?
Oh, it's been the dream for as long as I can remember. But, well, as my father says, willingness without action is fantasy. So I decided to just take a step forward. Whether this will be a full-blown career or not, I have stories I want to tell.
I mean, you're already ahead of the game if you break even. Most authors end up, especially indie authors, since TribePub is so slow, don't even earn back. So if you already break even, you're doing good. All right. And so because this is the Blasters and Blades podcast, we do have to subject you to the religion questions. Are you ready for this?
Fire away.
All right. Aragon, Rain of Fire, or Damsel?
Aragon. I remember Aragon being something quite influential when I was about 13. And I liked Aragon. I really liked Eldest. And I remember reading Inheritance and Bersinger. And while I don't really read much of Christopher Paluni's newest material, I do have tremendous respect for him because he pulled it off.
Absolutely. And I understand he was relatively young when he wrote Aragon.
Oh yes, he was about 15 when he wrote Aragon, and while the plot is a little formulaic, there's still passion behind the craft, and I have a lot of respect for passion.
Millions of readers can't be wrong. If that many people liked it, there's something there. So, all right. And because we are polytheistic here at the Blasters and Blades podcast, the Last Dragon Slayer, Dragonheart, or Dragons of Camelot.
Truth be told, I've heard of Dragonheart, but I don't really know any of those three series very well.
I thought they were pretty universal, and then somebody told me I was showing my age because these are like from the 80s. Okay. And finally, we have Knights of the Damned, Wyvern, or Dragons of Fury.
I hate to be the one to break your heart, Mr. Handley, but I really haven't heard of those three either.
Okay, fair. So what dragon content have you consumed and enjoyed?
Okay, well, I tend to look at dragons as more of the I like the classics. I like Maleficent as a dragon from the original Disney film Sleeping Beauty, and all the powers of hell. And in more contemporary work, you can't go wrong with Management from the MHI novels.
That's the Monster Hunter International?
Yes, Monster Hunter International has one dragon in particular, Management, the last dragon. It's kind of a spoiler for book 4, so...
Well, we don't want to do spoilers, so we'll just leave it there. Well, since you're going to school you did at least go to school for writing, did you read some of the classics like Beowulf with the dragon there and enjoy that?
As a matter of fact, I never ended up reading Beowulf. My brother read Beowulf.
How is that possible? That's like required reading, I thought.
Well, when I was in high school, my brother went for one English class where he could learn the classics from his favorite teacher. I went to the AP courses and I read a lot of Shakespeare and a lot of Jane Austen.
So we did the Iliad, the Odyssey, Grendel, Beowulf, Canterbury Tales. We did all of the classics. And then when I did the Canterbury Tales in grad school, or I guess undergrad, then we got to read it in the original Middle English, which was not fun. So I guess I just assumed that everyone studied those classic literature. Okay. Learn something new every day. Have you gone back to read them as an adult at all or no?
Oh, I haven't actually. I read the Odyssey several times. We read excerpts in middle school. We read excerpts in high school. We read excerpts in college. I'm pretty well familiar with the Odyssey, but I didn't actually spend that much time with the classics, or at least when I was in college, I was in the honors college, and I read the Aeneid. I read Dante. I read a little bit of the Canterbury Tales. I read some of the Gnostics. I read a lot, but I didn't read a lot of classical literature.
Okay. Well, I haven't read the Aeneid in years, so I've been trying to force myself to revisit some of the classics in literature.
I did enjoy the Aeneid very much.
Yeah, it's one of those ones that I don't think I've read that one. I've read all the others you mentioned. Interesting. We're probably going to bore our readers. So did you enjoy some of the more pop culture references to dragons? Like, I don't know, How to Train Your Dragon or Pete's Dragon, if you're old enough.
Oh, I really liked How to Train Your Dragon. And I never saw the original Pete's Dragon, at least not that I can remember. But I did see the remake where the dragon is sort of a cryptid in the Pacific Northwest. And I really enjoyed it.
I need to watch that one. The reboot.
It's one of the better Disney reboots, I'd say, because it doesn't try to denigrate the original. It simply takes the same premise, a boy being raised by a dragon, and rolls with it. And I actually found it to be very respectful to the past, but also a simple story. And I think we've lost that in recent years. There's so much of even children's entertainment has not been very simple. It's all about franchises and complex myth arcs. And while there's always been a place for that, and some of the best stories ever told had that, sometimes a simple story is all you need.
Yeah, there's room for the summer read popcorn stories or the bubblegum pop kind of adventures that are just fun to lose yourself in and forget about in 10 minutes after you finish. But you had fun while you were doing it.
Oh, yes.
Okay. All right. So as you noticed, dear listener, we've been talking about dragons because that's what's in the title of the episode. So let's see what this Deadly Flames, Dragons in Combat Anthology is all about. So I'm going to attempt my movie trailer voice, people. I will fail miserably. You can point and laugh. Totally okay. Luckily, that guy has job security for one more day because I ain't competition. But prepare for a fierce battle as you step into a world where dragons clash with courage and ferocity. In the 17 gripping tales, heroes rise and fall, facing fire-breathing foes in epic confrontations. Each story unravels a unique conflict, from desperate towns defending their homes to warriors seeking vengeance. Meet the brave and the foolhardy, each with their own motives. Discover the price of power and the cost of survival. Will they conquer the flames, or will they be consumed? Join the fight. The dragons await, and the stakes are deadly. Bum, bum, bum. All right, so you wrote your story. Guy's got his job security for one more day. You wrote your story titled Ashes to Ashes. Does this fit into a larger universe that you wrote?
Oh, no. Well, this is a standalone.
So what was the inspiration for this standalone story? Could you give us the basis of how you came up with it?
I wrote this one a while ago, but let's see. Well, Ashes to Ashes, and like I said, I like villains that are villains. I haven't been very satisfied with the recent media turn towards whitewashing villains that were explicitly evil in previous works. I love stories of redemption. And make no mistake of that, but sometimes evil is evil. And I thought, okay, an evil dragon. And then I thought, a dragon of hellfire. And then I thought, okay, what would fight a dragon? And then I thought, the scion of an angel. That was who could fight a dragon. I mean, the open call under Three Ravens, where I had originally intended this story, was about the dragons being absolute creatures of nightmare.
Absolutely. A lot of times, with the culture where shifters become a thing and romancing the mythos is kind of out there. Panel idea. Everybody likes the dragon that's on your side, or Pete's dragon, or How to Train Your Dragon, but I always have been drawn to the dragon that St. George had to slay, kind of thing. So I kind of dug it. And then we had so many submissions, and some of them were so good, we had more than we could fit in the 2 anthology volumes. So we just hosted a third separately so we could get these stories out there. Because my mom thought that she's the one who runs the back end, thought they were so good they needed to see the light of day. So what can you tell us about the main character, this scion angel?
Well, the main character, or isn't the angel himself, or rather the scion of an angel. The main character.
What's the difference?
Well, a scion is basically another word for hybrid.
Okay.
And he's half angel, half human. He's inspired by the stories of the Nephilim, or at least some interpretations of the Nephilim. In the book of Genesis, the sons of God looked at the daughters of men, and then there were giants in those days. Though a strict reading of the Bible would indicate that Nephilim were not half angel, but I digress. The main character is actually a man named Sayet, who is a bounty hunter. He can take bear, wolf, panther, or boar, anything that's ravaging the countryside, but he's no match for a dragon. When a dragon destroys his village and kills several of his family, Sayet is maddened with grief and wants revenge. But he can't take the dragon alone. So he confronts him and says that he will be the one to slay the dragon. And where did I put that? Yes. The half angel is named Uriah, who I named after the heroic figure in the Bible who was King David's right hand and a righteous warrior in his own right.
Okay. So is this set on Earth as it is now, a fantasy version of Earth? Like, what is the setting for the story?
Your standard fantastical medieval Europe. But
okay.
Maybe probably closer to the Age of Exploration than true medieval times. So circa 1700.
Interesting time. A lot going on in the world back then. So is he fighting with swords and shields, or, flintlocks are available in the 1700s? Is he fighting with one of those?
As I recall, well, most of what Syed, the bounty hunter, fights with is bows and arrows, because guns would ruin the pelts. But what Uriah fights with is a sword of fire.
Okay. Do you think you're going to want to come back and revisit this property to write more stories from these characters in this setting?
Maybe, but I think I actually did a pretty good job at tying this up as a standalone. Because Uriah disappears at the end of the story. The dragon is vanquished, but Uriah's not around to help clean up the mess.
Okay, that's fair. Some stories stand alone, and some lead to whole franchise IP. I mean, I've never seen a short story I couldn't turn into a 12-book arc, but not everyone's that way.
I should point out that I have one project that I've been outlining into bare minimum at least 7 novels, probably as many as 31, and I've been outlining it since I was 14.
Now that's more my speed. That's the kind of series I sink my teeth into. So what, obviously this is Dragon, this is fantasy story. What other subgenres would you want to put this story in? Is it any other of the major subgenres you think this fits into?
Well, I suppose that depends on how we're defining fantasy. I would say this probably lands somewhere in the swords and sorcery genre, albeit probably a bit more contemporary than what we'd see with Conan. However, I would also say that this is probably, I think you could probably consider this religious fantasy, because the opening scene is at a chapel. Well, the antagonist is the son of an angel. Well, the dragon explicitly says that it's fallen with a capital F.
Okay. So you like writing stories with religious undertones? That's probably the best thematic category for you?
Absolutely.
Okay. So what is it about that classification of story, which really almost supersedes genre, even though it gets classified as a subgenre, because you can put that into any story. C.S. Lewis proved that. But
That man is my hero.
Chesterton did some of that too. Well, we had a guy who wrote unofficial biography of him in a fantasy setting that we interviewed. But what is it about stories that have those religious sort of undertones that you like so much?
Well, the story of Jesus Christ is the greatest story ever told. And when I've always wanted to tell stories that bring glory to God. And I've always wanted to look for stories that brought glory to God. When I was in high school, my favorite series was the Vasi Kedar Chronicles. And they're one of the best written religious, think of them almost as a religious Game of Thrones.
Okay.
They're very, very, very good.
So what you're describing of your genre, and this is the history nerd in me getting a little bit wonky, but you're basically describing the medieval passion plays. You're modernizing the concept.
To a degree, I suppose.
Okay, I can dig it. Those were popular for a reason.
And yeah. C.S. Lewis in Narnia. That's probably my greatest inspiration.
So we did promise you, dear listener, a short interview for a short story. And when you get your full novel out, obviously you come back, we'll talk for an hour. We've invited you on to several of the panels, or at least we told you how to pick the ones that appeal to you that we'll be doing going forward. But because this is want to end on a fun note, if you could live in the story universe you just created, would you?
No, you mean for Ashes to Ashes?
Yes.
Thank you. I like living in an era with indoor plumbing.
The standard answer when people ask me about my worlds, because I write kind of sometimes dark experiences for the soldiers, is always yes, but with enough plot armor. So even with plot armor, they don't have plumbing. So that's a no-go for you?
No, thank you.
All right. So Jordan, if people wanted to follow the rest of your writing, because you haven't just written for our anthology, you've written for Raconteur Press. And I seem to remember seeing a few others on your author page. Where on Amazon? Where can people find you?
Well, I've been in Raconteur Press. I've been with Ye Olde Dragon Books. I've been with Bayonet Books. I've been with Camden Park Press. I've been in... I'll have to double check the name of the anthology, but I was in a Bigfoot anthology last year.
Nice. Yetis. I dig it. So, all right. So you've been all over the place. Any open call you find that you like, you just throw stories at. See what sticks. I dig it.
Pretty much, Mr. Handley. I've submitted 3 stories in the last 2 weeks to 3 different anthologies.
Well done. Congratulations. Very prolific. Well, this is the part, dear listener, where I remind you to please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right readers find the right books, and they really do matter, especially with small presses like Bayonet Books, Raconteur Press, Three Ravens, Hinchman Press. The ones you mentioned that just escaped my mind the minute I started talking because I had them in my head before that. But yeah, so all of those.
Ye Olde Dragons, Camden Park Press.
There you go. All of those reviews really do help. And if you're reading anthologies specifically, if there's one story that stood out to you, it doesn't hurt to mention that by name. The authors that wrote that story will be forever in your, like, he'll love you forever and light a candle to you at church or whatever they do. Because most of the time, when you review an anthology, you don't know if it's your story they liked or just in general. And so if they single you out by name, that's like, whoo, shot to the heart right there. So with that being said, you can find us, a dear listener, on our Linktree, linktr.ee, Linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast. Again, Linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast, where we link to all the things, the bits, shoots, the rumbles, the YouTubes, the TikToks, maybe the Twitter, the Spotify. We have our Blasters and Blades Facebook group and Facebook page. We have our email, Blasters and Blades Podcast @gmail.com. Again, Blasters and Blades Podcast @gmail.com. For professional purposes only, people. Keep the shenanigans to Mountain Stabby Stab on the Instagram, Twitter, and the email. You can support the show directly at buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section that it is for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink that coffee brand coffee hot chocolate until their hair turns to chocolate, and then no, that just sounds gross and cannibalistic. I'll find a better pun for next time, dear listener. I absolutely promise you. But when you do go to Coffee Brand Coffee, you use the link in the show notes with our code Podcast Grunts. You get 10% off. We get a bit of a kickback. You help us. We help you. You shop local. It's a win-win, people. And that's really all we can ask for. And, we do appreciate your patronage. This is what helps keeps the lights on, because this show is not free to produce. So every penny helps. And with that, I would like to thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy co-host, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. All right, Jordan, thank you for coming on. We definitely have to have you back when that novel comes out, and on any of those panels that speak to you, because this was fun. And we deserve an hour of fun next time instead of only 30 minutes.
I'll keep you posted.
All right. You have a nice day, sir. And with that, wait for it. We're hitting the